Book 3, Part 1 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories Volume 1 by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A. D. Godley. Book 3, Part 1, Parts 1 to 19. Cyrus' son Cambyses was leading an army of his subjects, Ionian and Aeolian Greeks among them, against this Amasis for the following reason. Cambyses had sent a herald to Egypt, asking Amasis for his daughter. He asked on the advice of an Egyptian, who advised it out of resentment against Amasis, that out of all of the Egyptian physicians Amasis had dragged him away from his wife and children, and sent him up to Persia when Cyrus sent to Amasis asking for the best eye doctor in Egypt. Out of resentment, the Egyptian by his advice induced Cambyses to ask Amasis for his daughter, so that Amasis would either be wretched if he gave her, or hated by Cambyses if he did not. Amasis, intimidated by the power of Persia and frightened, could neither give his daughter nor refuse her, for he knew well that Cambyses was not going to take her as his wife but as his concubine. After considering the matter, he did as follows. There was a daughter of the former king Apries, all that was left of that family, quite tall and pretty, and her name was Nitithis. This girl Amasis adorned with clothes and gold and sent to Cambyses as his own daughter. But after a time, as he embraced her, addressing her as the daughter of Amasis, the girl said to him, "O king, you do not understand how you have been made a fool of by Amasis, who dressed me in finery and sent me to you as his own daughter, when I am in fact the daughter of Apries, the ruler Amasis revolted from with the Egyptians and killed." This speech and this crime that occurred turned Cyrus' son Cambyses furiously angry against Egypt. So the Persians say. But the Egyptians, who say that Cambyses was the son of this daughter of Apries, claim him as one of theirs. They say that it was Cyrus who asked Amasis for his daughter, and not Cambyses, but what they say is false. They are certainly not unaware, for if any understand the customs of the Persians, the Egyptians do. Firstly, that it is not their custom for illegitimate offspring to rule when there are legitimate offspring, and secondly, that Cambyses was the son of Cassandane, the daughter of Pharnaspis, who is an Achaemenid, and not of the Egyptian woman. But they falsify the story, pretending to be related to the house of Cyrus. That is the truth of the matter. The following story, incredible to me, is also told, that one of the Persian women who came to visit Cyrus' wives, and saw the tall and attractive children who stood by Cassandane, expressed her admiration in extravagant terms. Then Cassandane, Cyrus' wife, said, "Although I am the mother of such children, Cyrus dishonours me and honours his new woman from Egypt." So she spoke in her bitterness against Nitithis, and Cambyses, the eldest of her sons, said, "Then, mother, when I am grown up, I will turn all Egypt upside down." When he said this, he was about 10 years old, and the women were amazed. But he kept it in mind, and it was thus that when he grew up and became king, he made the campaign against Egypt. It so happened, too, that something else occurred contributing to this campaign. There was among Amasis mercenaries a man who was a Halicarnassian by birth, a clever man and a good soldier, whose name was Phanes. This Phanes had some grudge against Amasis, and fled from Egypt aboard ship, hoping to talk to Cambyses. Since he was a man much admired among the mercenaries, and had an exact knowledge of all Egyptian matters, Amasis was anxious to catch him, and sent a trireme with his most trusted eunuch to pursue him. This eunuch caught him in Lycia, but never brought him back to Egypt, for Phanes was too clever for him. He made his guards drunk, and so escaped to Persia. There he found Cambyses prepared to set out against Egypt, but in doubt as to his march, how he should cross the waterless desert. So Phanes showed him what was Amis's condition, and how he should march. As to this, he advised Cambyses to send and ask the king of the Arabians for a safe passage. Now the only apparent way of entry into Egypt is this. The road runs from Phoenicia as far as the borders of the city of Cadatis, which belongs to the so-called Syrians of Palestine. From Cadatis, which as I judge is a city not much smaller than Sardis, to the city of Enesus the seaports belonged to the Arabians. Then the Assyrian again from Enesus as far as the Sabonian marsh, beside which the Cassian promontory stretches seawards. From this Sabonian marsh, where Typho is supposed to have been hidden, the country is Egypt. Now between Enesus and the Cassian mountain and the Sabonian marsh there lies a wide territory for as much as 3 days' journey, terribly arid. I am going to mention something now which few of those who sail to Egypt know. Earthen jars full of wine are brought into Egypt twice a year from all Greece and Phoenicia besides, yet one might safely say there is not a single empty wine jar anywhere in the country. What then, one may ask, becomes of them? I shall explain this too. Each governor of a district must gather in all the earthen pots from his own township and take them to Memphis, and the people of Memphis must fill them with water and carry them to those arid lands of Syria. So the earthen pottery that is brought to Egypt and unloaded or emptied there is carried to Syria to join the stock that has already been taken there. Now as soon as the Persians took possession of Egypt, they became the caretakers of the entryway into it, having it provisioned with water in the way I have described. But at this time there was as yet no ready supply of water, and so Cambyses, hearing what was said by the stranger from Halicarnassus, sent messengers to the Arabian and asked and obtained safe conduct, giving to him and receiving from him pledges. There are no men who respect pledges more than the Arabians. This is how they give them. A man stands between the two pledging parties, and with a sharp stone cuts the palms of their hands, near the thumb. Then he takes a piece of wood from the cloak of each, and smears with their blood 7 stones that lie between them, meanwhile calling on Dionysus and the heavenly Aphrodite. After this is done, the one who has given his pledge commends the stranger, or his countryman if the other be one, to his friends, and his friends hold themselves bound to honour the pledge. They believe in no other gods except Dionysus and the heavenly Aphrodite, and they say that they wear their hair as Dionysus does his, cutting it round the head and shaving the temples. They call Dionysus Orotol, and Aphrodite Alilat. When then the Arabian had made the pledge to the messengers who had come from Cambyses, he devised the following expedient. He filled camel skins with water and loaded all his camels with these. Then he drove them into the waterless land, and there awaited Cambyses' army. This is the most credible of the stories told, but I must relate the less credible tale also, since they tell it. There is a great river in Arabia called Chorus, emptying into the sea called Red. From this river, it is said, the king of the Arabians brought water by an aqueduct made of sown ox hides and other hides, and extensive enough to reach to the dry country. And he had great tanks dug in that country to try to receive and keep the water. It is a 12 days' journey from the river to that desert. By 3 aqueducts, they say, he brought the water to 3 different places. Psammenitus, son of Amasis, was encamped by the mouth of the Nile called Pelusium, awaiting Cambyses. For when Cambyses marched against Egypt, he found Amasis no longer alive. He had died after reigning 44 years, during which he had suffered no great misfortune, and being dead he was embalmed and laid in the burial place built for him in the temple. While his son Psammenitus was king of Egypt, the people saw an extraordinary thing, namely rain at Thebes of Egypt, where, as the Thebans themselves say, there had never been rain before, nor since to my lifetime. For indeed there is no rain at all in the upper parts of Egypt, but at that time a drizzle of rain fell at Thebes. When the Persians had crossed the waterless country and encamped near the Egyptians intending to engage them, the Egyptian mercenaries, Greeks and Carians, devised a plan to punish Phanes, angered at him for leading a foreign army into Egypt. Phanes had left sons in Egypt. These they brought to the camp, into their father's sight, and set a great bowl between the 2 armies. Then they brought the sons one by one and cut their throats over the bowl. When all the sons had been slaughtered, they poured wine and water into the bowl, and the mercenaries drank this and then gave battle. The fighting was fierce, and many of both armies fell, but at last the Egyptians were routed. I saw a strange thing on the site of the battle, of which the people of the country had told me. The bones of those killed on either side in this fight lying scattered separately, for the Persian bones lay in one place and the Egyptian in another, where the armies had first separately stood. The skulls of the Persians are so brittle that if you throw no more than a pebble it will pierce them, but the Egyptian skulls are so strong that a blow of a stone will hardly crack them. And this, the people said, which for my own part I readily believed, is the explanation of it. The Egyptians shave their heads from childhood, and the bone thickens by exposure to the sun. This also is the reason why they do not grow bald, for nowhere can one see so few bald heads as in Egypt. Their skulls then are strong for this reason, while the Persian skulls are weak because they cover their heads throughout their lives with the felt hats called tiaras which they wear. Such is the truth of the matter. I saw too the skulls of those Persians at Perpremis who were killed with Darius and Achaemenus by Inaros the Libyan, and they were like the others. After their rout in the battle the Egyptians fled in disorder, and when they had been overtaken in Memphis, Cambyses sent a Persian herald up the river aboard a Mytilenean boat to invite the Egyptians to an accord. But when they saw the boat coming to Memphis, they sallied out all together from their walls, destroyed the boat, dismembered the crew like butchers, and carried them within the walls. So the Egyptians were besieged, and after a long while surrendered. But the neighbouring Libyans, frightened by what had happened in Egypt, surrendered without a fight, laying tribute on themselves and sending gifts, and so too did the people of Cyrene and Barca, frightened like the Libyans. Cambyses received in all kindness the gifts of the Libyans, but he seized what came from Cyrene, and, displeased, I think, because it was so little, for the Cyreneans had sent 500 silver minae, cast it with his own hands among his army. On the 10th day after the surrender of the walled city of Memphis, Cambyses took Psammenitus, king of Egypt, who had reigned for 6 months, and confined him in the outer part of the city with other Egyptians to insult him. Having confined him there, he tried Psammenitus' spirit, as I shall show. He dressed the daughter of the king as a slave, and sent her out with a pitcher to fetch water, together with other girls from the families of the leading men, dressed like the daughter of the king. So when the girls went out before their father's eyes, crying and lamenting, all the rest answered with cries and weeping, seeing their children abused. But Psammenitus, having seen with his own eyes and learned all, bowed himself to the ground. After the water carriers had passed by, Cambyses next made Psammenitus' son go out before him with 2,000 Egyptians of the same age, all with ropes bound around their necks and bridle bits in their mouths. They were led out to be punished for those Mytileneans who had perished with their boat at Memphis, for such was the judgment of the royal judges, that every man's death be paid for by the deaths of 10 noble Egyptians. When Psammenitus saw them passing, and perceived that his son was being led out to die, and all the Egyptians who sat with him wept and showed their affliction, he did as he had done at the sight of his daughter. After these too had gone out, it happened that there was one of his companions, a man past his prime, who had lost all his possessions, and had only what a poor man might have, and begged of the army. This man now went out before Psammenitus son of Amasis and the Egyptians confined in the outer part of the city. When Psammenitus saw him he broke into loud weeping, striking his head and calling on his companion by name. Now there were men set to watch Psammenitus, who told Cambyses all that he did as each went forth. Wondering at what the king did, Cambyses made this inquiry of him by a messenger. Psammenitus, Lord Cambyses wants to know why, seeing your daughter abused and your son going to his death, you did not cry out or weep, yet you showed such feeling for the beggar, who, as Cambyses learns from others, is not one of your kindred. So the messenger inquired. Psammenitus answered, Son of Cyrus, my private grief was too great for weeping. but the unhappiness of my companion deserves tears. A man fallen from abundance and prosperity to beggary, come to the threshold of old age. When the messenger reported this, Cambyses and his court, it is said, thought the answer good. And the Egyptians say Croesus wept, for it happened that he too had come with Cambyses to Egypt. And the Persians that were there wept. Cambyses himself felt some pity, and he ordered that Semenetius' son be spared from those that were to be executed, and that Semenetius himself be brought in from the outer part of the city and brought before him. Those that went for him found that the son was no longer alive, but had been the first to be slaughtered. But they brought Semenetius up and led him to Cambyses, and there he lived, and no violence was done him for the rest of his life. And if he had known how to mind his own business, he would have regained Egypt to govern. For the Persians are inclined to honour kings' sons. Even though kings revolt from them, they give back to their sons the sovereign power. There are many instances showing that it is their custom to do so, and notably the giving back of his father's sovereign power to Sanarus, son of Inaros, and also to Porcerus, son of Amataeus. Yet none ever did the Persians more harm than Inaros and Amataeus. But as it was, Semenetius plotted evil and got his reward, for he was caught raising a revolt among the Egyptians, and when Cambyses heard of it, Semenetius drank bull's blood and died. Such was his end. From Memphis Cambyses went to the city Sais, anxious to do exactly what he did do. Entering the house of Amasis, he had the body of Amasis carried outside from its place of burial, and when this had been done, he gave orders to scourge it and pull out the hair and pierce it with goads, and to desecrate it in every way. When they were weary of doing this, for the body, being embalmed, remained whole and did not fall to pieces, Cambyses gave orders to burn it, a sacrilegious command, for the Persians hold fire to be a god. Therefore neither nation thinks it right to burn the dead. The Persians for the reason given, as they say it is wrong to give the dead body of a man to a god, while the Egyptians believe fire to be a living beast that devours all that it catches, and when sated with its meal dies together with that on which it feeds. Now it is by no means their custom to give the dead to beasts, and this is why they embalm the corpse, that it may not lie and feed worms. Thus what Cambyses commanded was contrary to the custom of both peoples. The Egyptians say, however, that it was not Amasis to whom this was done, but another Egyptian of the same age as Amasis, whom the Persians abused, thinking that they were abusing Amasis. For their story is that Amasis learned from an oracle what was to be done to him after his death, and so to escape this fate buried this dead man, the one that was scourged, near the door inside his own vault, and ordered his son that he himself should be laid in the farthest corner of the vault. I think that these commands of Amasis regarding the burial place and the man were never given at all, and that the Egyptians believed them in vain. After this Cambyses planned 3 expeditions, against the Carchedonians, against the Ammonians, and against the long-lived Ethiopians, who inhabit that part of Libya that is on the southern sea. He decided after consideration to send his fleet against the Carthaginians, and a part of his land army against the Ammonians. To Ethiopia he would first send spies, to see what truth there was in the story of a table of the sun in that country, and to spy out all else besides, under the pretext of bringing gifts for the Ethiopian king. Now the table of the sun is said to be something of this kind. There is a meadow outside the city, filled with the boiled flesh of all 4-footed things. Here during the night the men of authority among the townsmen are careful to set out the meat, and all day whoever wishes comes and feasts on it. These meats, say the people of the country, are ever produced by the earth itself. Such is the story of the sun's table. When Cambyses determined to send the spies, he sent for those fish-eaters from the city of Elephantine who understood the Ethiopian language. While they were fetching them, he ordered his fleet to sail against Carthage, but the Phoenicians said they would not do it, for they were bound, they said, by strong oaths, and if they sailed against their own progeny they would be doing an impious thing, and the Phoenicians being unwilling, the rest were inadequate fighters. Thus the Carthaginians escaped being enslaved by the Persians, for Cambyses would not use force with the Phoenicians, seeing that they had willingly surrendered to the Persians, and the whole fleet drew its strength from them. The Cyprians too had come of their own accord to aid the Persians against Egypt. End of Book 3, Part 1. Book 3, Part 2 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories Volume 1 by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A. D. Godley. Book 3, Part 2, Parts 20 to 38. When the fish-eaters arrived from Elephantine at Cambyses' summons, he sent them to Ethiopia, with orders what to say, and bearing as gifts a red cloak and a twisted gold necklace and bracelets, and an alabaster box of incense and an earthenware jar of palm wine. These Ethiopians, to whom Cambyses sent them, are said to be the tallest and most handsome of all men. Their way of choosing kings is different from that of all others, as it is said are all their laws. They consider that man worthy to be their king whom they judge to be tallest and to have strength proportional to his stature. When the fish-eaters arrived among these men, they gave the gifts to their king, and said, Cambyses, the king of the Persians, wishing to become your friend and ally, sent us with orders to address ourselves to you, and he offers you as gifts these things which he enjoys using himself. But the Ethiopian, perceiving that they had come as spies, spoke thus to them: It is not because he values my friendship that the Persian king sends you with gifts, nor do you speak the truth, for you have come to spy on my realm. Nor is that man just, for were he just he would not have coveted a land other than his own, nor would he try to lead into slavery men by whom he has not been injured. Now give him this bow and this message. The king of the Ethiopians advises the king of the Persians to bring overwhelming odds to attack the long-lived Ethiopians when the Persians can draw a bow of this length as easily as I do, but until then to thank the gods who do not incite the sons of the Ethiopians to add other land to their own. So speaking, he unstrung the bow and gave it to the men who had come. Then, taking the red cloak, he asked what it was and how it was made, and when the fish-eaters told him the truth about the colour and the process of dyeing, he said that both the men and their garments were full of deceit. Next he inquired about the twisted gold necklace and the bracelets, and when the fish-eaters told him how they were made, the king smiled, and thinking them to be fetters, said, We have stronger chains than these. Thirdly he inquired about the incense, and when they described making and applying it, he made the same reply as about the cloak. But when he came to the wine and asked about its making, he was vastly pleased with the drink, and asked further what food their king ate, and what was the greatest age to which a Persian lived. They told him their king ate bread, showing him how wheat grew, and said that the full age to which a man might hope to live was 80 years. Then, said the Ethiopian, it was no wonder that they lived so few years if they ate dung. They would not even have been able to live that many unless they were refreshed by the drink, signifying to the fish-eaters the wine. For in this, he said, the Persians excelled the Ethiopians. The fish-eaters then in turn asking of the Ethiopian length of life and diet, he said that most of them attained to 120 years, and some even to more. Their food was boiled meat, and their drink milk. The spies showed wonder at the tale of years, whereupon he led them, it is said, to a spring, by washing in which they grew sleeker as though it were of oil, and it smelled of violets. So light, the spies said, was this water, that nothing would float on it, neither wood nor anything lighter than wood, but all sank to the bottom. If this water is truly such as they say, it is likely that their constant use of it makes the people long-lived. When they left the spring, the king led them to a prison where all the men were bound with fetters of gold. Among these Ethiopians there is nothing so scarce and so precious as bronze. Then, having seen the prison, they saw what is called the Table of the Sun. Last after this they viewed the Ethiopian coffins. These are said to be made of alabaster, as I shall describe. They cause the dead body to shrink, either as the Egyptians do or in some other way, then cover it with gypsum and paint it all as far as possible in the likeness of the living man. Then they set it within a hollow pillar of alabaster, which they dig in abundance from the ground, and it is easily worked. The body can be seen in the pillar through the alabaster, no evil stench nor anything unpleasant proceeding from it, and showing clearly all its parts, as if it were the man himself. The nearest of kin keep the pillar in their houses for a year, giving it of the first fruits and offering it sacrifices, after which they bring the pillars out and set them round about the city. Having seen everything, the spies departed again. When they reported all this, Cambyses was angry and marched at once against the Ethiopians, neither giving directions for any provision of food, nor considering that he was about to lead his army to the ends of the earth, being not right in his mind, but mad. However, he marched at once on hearing from the fish-eaters, ordering the Greeks who were with him to await him where they were, and taking with him all his land army. When he came in his march to Thebes, he detached about 50,000 men from his army, and directed them to enslave the Ammonians and burn the oracle of Zeus, and he himself went on towards Ethiopia with the rest of his host. But before his army had accomplished the fifth part of their journey, they had come to an end of all there was in the way of provision, and after the food was gone, they ate the beasts of burden until there was none of these left either. Now had Cambyses, when he perceived this, changed his mind and led his army back again, he would have been a wise man at last after his first fault, but as it was he went ever forward, taking account of nothing. While his soldiers could get anything from the earth, they kept themselves alive by eating grass, but when they came to the sandy desert, some did a terrible thing, taking by lot 1 man out of 10 and eating him. Hearing this, Cambyses feared their becoming cannibals, and so gave up his expedition against the Ethiopians and marched back to Thebes, with the loss of many of his army. From Thebes he came down to Memphis and sent the Greeks to sail away. So fared the expedition against Ethiopia. As for those who were sent to march against the Ammonians, they set out and journeyed from Thebes with guides, and it is known that they came to the city of Oasis, inhabited by Samians said to be of the Escroonian tribe. 7 days' march from Thebes across sandy desert, this place is called in the Greek language Islands of the Blessed. Thus far it is said the army came. After that, except for the Ammonians themselves and those who heard from them, no man can say anything of them, for they neither reached the Ammonians nor returned back. But this is what the Ammonians themselves say. When the Persians were crossing the sand from Oasis to attack them, and were about midway between their country and Oasis, while they were breakfasting, a great and violent south wind arose, which buried them in the masses of sand which it bore, and so they disappeared from sight. Such is the Ammonian tale about this army. When Cambyses was back at Memphis, there appeared in Egypt that Apis whom the Greeks call Epiphas, at whose epiphany the Egyptians put on their best clothing and held a festival. Seeing the Egyptians so doing, Cambyses was fully persuaded that these signs of joy were for his misfortunes, and summoned the rulers of Memphis. When they came before him, he asked them why the Egyptians behaved so at the moment he returned with so many of his army lost, though they had done nothing like it when he was before at Memphis. The rulers told him that a god, wont to appear after long intervals of time, had now appeared to them, and that all Egypt rejoiced and made holiday whenever he so appeared. At this Cambyses said that they lied, and he punished them with death for their lie. Having put them to death, he next summoned the priests before him. When they gave him the same account, he said that if a tame god had come to the Egyptians he would know it, and with no more words he bade the priests bring Apis. So they went to fetch and bring him. This Apis or Epiphas is a calf born of a cow that can never conceive again. By what the Egyptians say, the cow is made pregnant by a light from heaven, and thereafter gives birth to Apis. The marks of this calf called Apis are these. He is black, and has on his forehead a three-cornered white spot, and the likeness of an eagle on his back. The hairs of the tail are double, and there is a knot under the tongue. When the priests led Apis in, Cambyses, for he was all but mad, drew his dagger, and meaning to stab the calf in the belly, struck the thigh. Then laughing, he said to the priests, "Simpletons, are these your gods, creatures of flesh and blood that can feel weapons of iron? That is a god worthy of the Egyptians. But for you, you shall suffer for making me your laughing stock." So saying, he bade those whose business it was to scourge the priests well, and to kill any other Egyptian whom they found holiday making. So the Egyptian festival ended, and the priests were punished, and Apis lay in the temple and died of the wound in the thigh. When he was dead of the wound, the priests buried him without Cambyses' knowledge. But Cambyses, the Egyptians say, owing to this wrongful act, immediately went mad, although even before he had not been sensible. His first evil act was to destroy his full brother Smerdis, whom he had sent away from Egypt to Persia out of jealousy, because Smerdis alone could draw the bow brought from the Ethiopian by the fish eaters as far as 2 fingerbreadths, but no other Persian could draw it. Smerdis having gone to Persia, Cambyses saw in a dream a vision, in which it seemed to him that a messenger came from Persia and told him that Smerdis sitting on the royal throne touched heaven with his head. Fearing therefore for himself, lest his brother might slay him and so be king, he sent Prothospes, the most trusted of his Persians, to Persia to kill him. Prothospes went up to Susa and killed Smerdis. Some say that he took Smerdis out hunting, others that he brought him to the Red Sea and there drowned him. This, they say, was the first of Cambyses' evil acts. Next he destroyed his full sister, who had come with him to Egypt and whom he had taken to wife. He married her in this way, for before this it had by no means been customary for Persians to marry their sisters. Cambyses was infatuated with one of his sisters, and when he wanted to marry her, because his intention was contrary to usage, he summoned the royal judges and inquired whether there were any law enjoining one that so desired to marry his sister. These royal judges are men chosen out from the Persians to function until they die or are detected in some injustice. It is they who decide suits in Persia and interpret the laws of the land. All matters are referred to them. These then replied to Cambyses with an answer which was both just and prudent, namely that they could find no law enjoining a brother to marry his sister, but that they had found a law permitting the king of Persia to do whatever he liked. Thus, although they feared Cambyses, they did not break the law, and to save themselves from death for keeping it, they found another law abetting one who wished to marry sisters. So Cambyses married the object of his desire, yet not long afterwards he took another sister as well. It was the younger of these who had come with him to Egypt, and whom he now killed. There are 2 tales of her death, as there are of the death of Smerdis. The Greeks say that Cambyses had set a lion cub to fight a puppy, and that this woman was watching too, and that as the puppy was losing, its brother broke its leash and came to help, and the 2 dogs together got the better of the cub. Cambyses, they say, was pleased with the sight, but the woman wept as she sat by. Cambyses, perceiving it, asked why she wept, and she said that when she saw the puppy help its brother she had wept recalling Smerdis and knowing that there would be no avenger for him. For saying this, according to the Greek story, she was killed by Cambyses. But the Egyptian tale is that as the 2 sat at table the woman took a lettuce and plucked off its leaves, then asked her husband whether he preferred the look of it with or without leaves. "With the leaves," he said, whereupon she answered, "Yet you have stripped Sire's house as bare as this lettuce." Angered at this, they say, he sprang upon her, who was great with child, and she miscarried and died of the hurt he gave her. Such were Cambyses' mad acts to his own household. Whether they were done because of Apis, or grew from some of the many troubles that are wont to beset man, for indeed he is said to have been afflicted from his birth with that grievous disease which some call sacred, It is not unlikely then that when his body was grievously afflicted his mind too should be diseased. I will now relate his mad dealings with the rest of Persia. He said, as they report, to Protsaspis, whom he held in particular honour, who brought him all his messages, whose son held the very honourable office of Cambyses' cupbearer, thus, I say, he spoke to Protsaspis. What manner of man, Protsaspis, do the Persians think me to be, and how do they speak of me? Sire, said Protsaspis, for all else they greatly praise you, but they say that you love wine too well. So he reported of the Persians. The king angrily replied, if the Persians now say that it is my fondness for wine that drives me to frenzy and madness, then it would seem that their former saying also was a lie. For it is said that before this, while some Persians and Croesus were sitting with him, Cambyses asked what manner of man they thought him to be in comparison with Cyrus his father, and they answered, Cambyses was the better man, for he had all of Cyrus' possessions and had won Egypt and the sea besides. So said the Persians, but Croesus, who was present and was dissatisfied with their judgment, spoke thus to Cambyses. To me, son of Cyrus, you do not seem to be the equal of your father, for you have as yet no son such as he left after him in you. This pleased Cambyses, and he praised Croesus' judgment. Remembering this then, he said to Protsaspis in his anger, judge then if the Persians speak the truth, or rather are themselves out of their minds when they speak of me so. Yonder stands your son in the porch. Now if I shoot and pierce his heart, that will prove the Persians to be wrong. If I miss, then say that they are right, and that I am out of my senses. So saying, he strung his bow and hit the boy, and gave orders to open the fallen body and examine the wound. And the arrow being found in the heart, Cambyses laughed in great glee, and said to the boy's father, it is plain, Protsaspis, that I am in my right mind, and the Persians mad. Now tell me, what man in the world did you ever see that shot so true to the mark? Protsaspis, it is said, replied, for he saw that Cambyses was mad, and he feared for his own life, Master, I think that not even the god himself could shoot so true. Thus did Cambyses then. At another time he took 12 Persians, equal to the noblest in the land, convicted them of some minor offence, and buried them alive up to the neck. For these acts Croesus the Lydian thought fit to take him to task, and addressed him thus: Sire, do not sacrifice everything to youth and temper, but restrain and control yourself. Prudence is a good thing, forethought is wise. But you kill men of your own country whom you have convicted of some minor offence, and you kill boys. If you do so often, beware lest the Persians revolt from you. As for me, your father Cyrus earnestly begged me to counsel you and to give you such advice as I think to be good. Croesus gave him this counsel out of good will, but Cambyses answered, it is very well that you should even dare to counsel me, you who governed your own country so well and gave fine advice to my father, telling him when the Masagatai were willing to cross over into our lands to pass the Araxes and attack them. Thus you worked your own ruin by misgoverning your country and Cyrus, who trusted you. But you shall regret it. I have long waited for an occasion to deal with you. With that Cambyses took his bow to shoot him dead, but Croesus leapt up and ran out, and Cambyses, being unable to shoot him, ordered his attendants to catch and kill him. They, knowing Cambyses' mood, hid Croesus, intending to reveal him and receive gifts for saving his life if Cambyses should repent and ask for Croesus, but if he should not repent nor wish Croesus back, then to kill the Lydian. Not long after this Cambyses did wish Croesus back, and the attendants, understanding this, told him that Croesus was alive still. Cambyses said that he was glad of it, but that they who had saved Croesus should not escape with impunity but be killed, and this was done. Cambyses committed many such mad acts against the Persians and his allies. He stayed at Memphis, and there opened ancient coffins and examined the dead bodies. Thus, too, he entered the temple of Hephaestus and jeered at the image there. This image of Hephaestus is most like the Phoenician Petaichi, whom the Phoenicians carry on the prows of their triremes. I will describe it for anyone who has not seen these figures. It is the likeness of a dwarf. Also he entered the temple of the Kabiri, into which no one may enter save the priest. The images here he even burnt with bitter mockery. These also are like the images of Hephaestus, and are said to be his sons. I hold it then in every way proved that Cambyses was quite insane, or he would never have set himself to deride religion and custom. For if it were proposed to all nations to choose which seemed best of all customs, each after examination would place its own first, so well is each convinced that its own are by far the best. It is not therefore to be supposed that any one except a madman would turn such things to ridicule. I will give this one proof among many from which it may be inferred that all men hold this belief about their customs. When Darius was king, he summoned the Greeks who were with him and asked them for what price they would eat their fathers' dead bodies. They answered that there was no price for which they would do it. Then Darius summoned those Indians who are called Calatii, who eat their parents, and asked them, the Greeks being present and understanding through interpreters what was said, what would make them willing to burn their fathers at death. The Indians cried aloud that he should not speak of so horrid an act. So firmly rooted are these beliefs, and it is, I think, rightly said in Pindar's poem that custom is lord of all. End of Book 3, Part 2.
Book 3, Part 3 of Herodotus Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Leeson. Histories Volume 1 by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A.D. Godley. Book 3, Part 3, paragraphs 39 through 60. While Cambyses was attacking Egypt, the Lacedaemonians too were making war upon Samos and upon Iasi's son Polycrates, who had revolted and won Samos. And first, dividing the city into 3 parts, he gave a share in the government to his brothers Pantagnotus and Seleucon. But presently he put one of them to death, banished the younger, Seleucon, and so made himself lord of all Samos. Then he made a treaty with Amasis, king of Egypt, sending to him and receiving from him gifts. Very soon after this, Polycrates grew to such power that he was famous in Ionia and all other Greek lands, for all his military affairs succeeded. He had 150 oared ships and 1,000 archers. And he pillaged every place indiscriminately, for he said that he would get more thanks if he gave a friend back what he had taken than if he never took it at all. He had taken many of the islands and many of the mainland cities. Among others, he conquered the Lesbians. They had brought all their force to aid the Milesians, and Polycrates defeated them in a sea fight. It was they who, being his captives, dug all the trench around the Acropolis of Samos. Now Amasis was somehow aware of Polycrates' great good fortune, and as this continued to increase greatly, he wrote this letter and sent it to Samos. Amasis addresses Polycrates as follows: "It is pleasant to learn that a friend and ally is doing well. But I do not like these great successes of yours, for I know the gods, how jealous they are, and I desire somehow that both I and those for whom I care succeed in some affairs, fail in others, and thus pass life faring differently by turns, rather than succeed at everything. For from all I have heard, I know of no man whom continual good fortune did not bring in the end to evil and utter destruction. Therefore, if you will be ruled by me, do this regarding your successes. Consider what you hold most precious and what you will be sorriest to lose, and cast it away so that it shall never again be seen among men. Then, if after this the successes that come to you are not mixed with mischances, strive to mend the matter as I have counseled you." Reading this, and perceiving that Amasis' advice was good, Polycrates considered which of his treasures it would most grieve his soul to lose, and came to this conclusion. He wore a seal set in gold, an emerald, crafted by Theodorus, son of Telecles of Samos. Being resolved to cast this away, he embarked in a 50-oared ship with its crew, and told them to put out to sea. And when he was far from the island, he took off the seal ring in sight of all that were on the ship, and cast it into the sea. This done, he sailed back and went to his house, where he grieved for the loss. But on the 5th or 6th day from this it happened that a fisherman, who had taken a fine and great fish, and desired to make a gift of it to Polycrates, brought it to the door, and said that he wished to see Polycrates. This being granted, he gave the fish, saying, "O king, when I caught this fish, I thought best not to take it to market, although I am a man who lives by his hands, but it seemed to me worthy of you and your greatness, and so I bring it and offer it to you." Polycrates was pleased with what the fisherman said. "You have done very well," he answered, "and I give you double thanks, for your words and for the gift, and I invite you to dine with me." Proud of this honor, the fisherman went home, but the servants, cutting up the fish, found in its belly Polycrates' seal ring. As soon as they saw and seized it, they brought it with joy to Polycrates, and giving the ring to him, told him how it had been found. Polycrates saw the hand of heaven in this matter. He wrote a letter and sent it to Egypt, telling all that he had done and what had happened to him. When Amasis had read Polycrates' letter, he perceived that no man could save another from his destiny, and that Polycrates, being so continually fortunate that he even found what he cast away, must come to an evil end. So he sent a herald to Samos, to renounce his friendship, determined that when some great and terrible mischance overtook Polycrates, he himself might not have to sadden his heart for a friend. It was against this ever victorious Polycrates that the Lacedaemonians now made war, invited by the Samians, who afterwards founded Cydonia in Crete. Polycrates had without the knowledge of his subjects sent a herald to Cambyses, son of Cyrus, then raising an army against Egypt, inviting Cambyses to send to Samos too and request men from him. At this message Cambyses very readily sent to Samos, asking Polycrates to send a fleet to aid him against Egypt. Polycrates chose those men whom he most suspected of planning a rebellion against him, and sent them in 40 triremes, directing Cambyses not to send the men back. Some say that these Samians who were sent never came to Egypt, but that when they had sailed as far as Carpathus, discussed the matter among themselves, and decided to sail no further. Others say that they did come to Egypt, and there escaped from the guard that was set over them. But as they sailed back to Samos, Polycrates' ships met and engaged them, and the returning Samians were victorious and landed on the island, but were there beaten in a land battle, and so sailed to Lacedaemon. There are those who say that the Samians from Egypt defeated Polycrates, but to my thinking this is untrue, for they need not have invited the Lacedaemonians if in fact they had been able to master Polycrates by themselves. Besides, it is not even reasonable to suppose that he, who had a great army of hired soldiers and bowmen of his own, was beaten by a few men like the returning Samians. Polycrates took the children and wives of the townsmen who were subject to him and shut them up in the boat houses, with intent to burn them and the boat houses too, if their men should desert to the returned Samians. When the Samians who were expelled by Polycrates came to Sparta, they came before the ruling men and made a long speech to show the greatness of their need. But the Spartans, at their first sitting, answered that they had forgotten the beginning of the speech and could not understand its end. After this, the Samians came a second time, with a sack, and said nothing but this: "The sack wants flour." To this the Spartans replied that they were overwordy with "the sack," but they did resolve to help them. The Lacedaemonians then equipped and sent an army to Samos, returning a favor, as the Samians say, because they first sent a fleet to help the Lacedaemonians against Messenia. But the Lacedaemonians say that they sent this army less to aid the Samians in their need than to avenge the robbery of the bowl which they had been carrying to Croesus, and the breastplate which Amasis king of Egypt had sent them as a gift. This breastplate had been stolen by the Samians in the year before they took the bowl. It was of linen, decked with gold and cotton embroidery, and embroidered with many figures. But what makes it worthy of wonder is that each thread of the breastplate, fine as each is made up of 360 strands, each plainly seen. It is the exact counterpart of the one which Amasis dedicated to Athena in Lindus. The Corinthians also enthusiastically helped to further the expedition against Samos. For an outrage had been done them by the Samians a generation before this expedition, about the time of the robbery of the bowl. Periander, son of Cypselus, sent to Alyattes at Sardis 300 boys, sons of notable men in Corcyra, to be made eunuchs. The Corinthians who brought the boys put in at Samos, and when the Samians heard why the boys were brought, first they instructed them to take sanctuary in the temple of Artemis, then they would not allow the suppliants to be dragged from the temple, and when the Corinthians tried to starve the boys out, the Samians held a festival which they still celebrate in the same fashion. Throughout the time that the boys were seeking asylum, they held nightly dances of young men and women, to which it was made a custom to bring cakes of sesame and honey, so that the Corcyraean boys might snatch these and have food. This continued to be done until the Corinthian guards left their charge and departed. Then the Samians took the boys back to Corcyra. If, after the death of Periander, the Corinthians had been friendly toward the Corcyraeans, they would not have taken part in the expedition against Samos for this reason. But as it was, ever since the island was colonized, they have been at odds with each other, despite their kinship. For these reasons then the Corinthians bore a grudge against the Samians. Periander chose the sons of the notable Corcyraeans and sent them to Sardis to be made eunuchs as an act of vengeance, for the Corcyraeans had first begun the quarrel by committing a terrible crime against him. For after killing his own wife Melissa, Periander suffered yet another calamity on top of what he had already suffered. He had 2 sons by Melissa, one 17 and one 18 years old. Their mother's father, Procles, the sovereign of Epidaurus, sent for the boys and treated them affectionately, as was natural, seeing that they were his own daughter's sons. When they left him, he said as he sent them forth, "Do you know, boys, who killed your mother?" The elder of them paid no attention to these words, but the younger, whose name was Lycophron, was struck with such horror when he heard them, that when he came to Corinth he would not speak to his father, his mother's murderer, nor would he answer him when addressed, nor reply to his questions. At last Periander was so angry that he drove the boy from his house. Having driven this one away, he asked the elder son what their grandfather had said to them. The boy told him that Procles had treated them kindly, but did not mention what he had said at parting, for he had paid no attention. Periander said that by no means could Procles not have dropped some hint, and interrogated him persistently, until the boy remembered and told him. And Periander, comprehending, and wishing to show no weakness, sent a message to those with whom his banished son was living, and forbade them to keep him. So when the boy, driven out, would go to another house, he would be driven from this also, since Periander threatened all who received him, and ordered them to shut him out. So when driven forth, he would go to some other house of his friends, and they, although he was the son of Periander, and although they were afraid, none the less took him in. In the end, Periander made a proclamation that whoever sheltered the boy in his house or spoke to him would owe a fine to Apollo, and he set the amount. In view of this proclamation no one wished to address or receive the boy into his house, and besides, the boy himself did not think it right to attempt what was forbidden, but accepting it slept in the open. On the 4th day, when Periander saw him starved and unwashed, he took pity on him, and his anger being softened, he came near and said, "My son, which is preferable, to follow your present way of life, or by being well disposed toward your father to inherit my power and the goods which I now possess? Though my son and a prince of prosperous Corinth, you prefer the life of a vagrant, by opposing and being angry with me with whom you least ought to be. For if something has happened as a result of which you have a suspicion about me, it has happened to my disadvantage, and I bear the brunt of it, inasmuch as I am the cause. But bearing in mind how much better it is to be envied than to be pitied, and at the same time what sort of thing it is to be angry with your parents and with those that are stronger than you, come back to the house." With these words Periander tried to move his son, but he said nothing else to his father, only told him that because he had conversed with him, he owed the fine to Apollo. When Periander saw that his son's stubbornness could not be got around or overcome, he sent him away out of his sight in a ship to Corcyra, for Corcyra too was subject to him. And when he had sent him away, he sent an army against Procles his father-in-law, since he was most to blame for his present troubles. And he took Epidaurus, captured Procles, and imprisoned him. As time went on, Periander, now grown past his prime and aware that he could no longer oversee and direct all his affairs, sent to Corcyra, inviting Lycophron to be sovereign, for he saw no hope in his eldest son, who seemed to him to be slow-witted. Lycophron did not dignify the invitation with a reply. Then Periander, pressing the young man, sent to him as the next best way his daughter, the boy's sister, thinking that he would listen to her. She came and said, "Child, would you want the power to fall to others, and our father's house destroyed, rather than to return and have it yourself? Come home and stop punishing yourself. Pride is an unhappy possession. Do not cure evil by evil. Many place the more becoming thing before the just, and many pursuing their mother's business have lost their father's. Power is a slippery thing. Many want it, and our father is now old and past his prime. Do not lose what is yours to others." So she spoke, communicating their father's inducements. But he answered that he would never come to Corinth as long as he knew his father was alive. When she brought this answer back, Periander sent a third messenger, through whom he proposed that he should go to Corcyra, and that the boy should return to Corinth and be the heir of his power. The son consented to this. Periander got ready to go to Corcyra, and Lycophron to go to Corinth. But when the Corcyraeans learned of all these matters, they put the young man to death, so that Periander would not come to their country. It was for this that Periander desired vengeance on the Corcyraeans. The Lacedaemonians then came with a great army and besieged Samos. They advanced to the wall and entered the tower that stands by the seaside in the outer part of the city, but then Polycrates himself attacked them with a great force and drove them out. The mercenaries and many of the Samians themselves sallied out near the upper tower on the ridge of the hill and withstood the Lacedaemonian advance for a little while. Then they fled back, with the Lacedaemonians pursuing and destroying them. Had all the Lacedaemonians there that day been like Archias and Lycopus, Samos would have been taken. These two alone entered the fortress along with the fleeing crowd of Samians, and were cut off and killed in the city of Samos. I myself have met in his native town of Pitana another Archias, son of Samius, and grandson of the Archias mentioned above, who honored the Samians more than any other of his guest friends, and told me that his father had borne the name Samius because he was the son of that Archias who was killed fighting bravely at Samos. The reason that he honored the Samians, he said, was that they had given his grandfather a public funeral. So when the Lacedaemonians had besieged Samos for 40 days with no success, they went away to the Peloponnesus. There is a foolish tale abroad that Polycrates bribed them to depart by making and giving them a great number of gilded lead coins as a native currency. This was the first expedition to Asia made by Dorians of Lacedaemon. When the Lacedaemonians were about to abandon them, the Samians who had brought an army against Polycrates sailed away too, and went to Cyphnus, for they were in need of money, and the Cyphnians were at this time very prosperous and the richest of the islanders, because of the gold and silver mines on the island. They were so wealthy that the treasure dedicated by them at Delphi, which is as rich as any there, was made from 1/10 of their income, and they divided among themselves each year's income. Now when they were putting together the treasure, they inquired of the oracle if their present prosperity was likely to last long, whereupon the priestess gave them this answer: "When the Prytaneum on Cyphnus becomes white, and white-browed the market, then indeed a shrewd man is wanted. Beware a wooden force and a red herald." At this time the marketplace and town hall of Cyphnus were adorned with Parian marble. They could not understand this oracle, either when it was spoken or at the time of the Samians' coming. As soon as the Samians put in at Cyphnus, they sent ambassadors to the town in one of their ships, Now, in ancient times all ships were painted with vermilion, and this was what was meant by the warning given by the priestess to the Scythians to beware a wooden force and a red herald. The messengers then demanded from the Scythians a loan of 10 talents. When the Scythians refused them, the Samians set about ravaging their lands. Hearing this, the Scythians came out at once to drive them off, but they were defeated in battle, and many of them were cut off from their town by the Samians, who presently exacted from them 100 talents. Then the Samians took from the men of Hermione, instead of money, the island Hydria, which is near to the Peloponnesus, and gave it to the men of Treason for safekeeping. They themselves settled at Cydonia in Crete, though their voyage had been made with no such intent, but rather to drive Zacynthians out of the island. Here they stayed and prospered for 5 years. Indeed, the temples now at Cydonia and the shrine of Dictynna are the Samians' work. But in the 6th year Aeginetans and Cretans came and defeated them in a sea fight and made slaves of them. Moreover, they cut off the ships' prows, that were shaped like boars' heads, and dedicated them in the temple of Athena in Aegina. The Aeginetans did this out of a grudge against the Samians, for previously the Samians, in the day when Amphicrates was king of Samos, sailing in force against Aegina, had hurt the Aeginetans and been hurt by them. This was the cause. I have written at such length of the Samians because the 3 greatest works of all the Greeks were engineered by them. The first of these is the tunnel, with a mouth at either end, driven through the base of a hill 900 feet high. The whole tunnel is 4,200 feet long, 8 feet high, and 8 feet wide, and throughout the whole of its length there runs a channel 30 feet deep and 3 feet wide, through which the water coming from an abundant spring is carried by pipes to the city of Samos. The designer of this work was Eupolinus, son of Nostrophus, a Megarian. This is one of the 3 works. The second is a breakwater in the sea enclosing the harbor, sunk 120 feet and more than 1,200 feet in length. The third Samian work is the temple, which is the greatest of all the temples of which we know. Its first builder was Rhecus, son of Phyles, a Samian. It is for this cause that I have expounded at more than ordinary length of Samos. End of Book 3, Part 3. Book 3, Part 4 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Leeson. Histories Volume 1 by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by A.D. Godley. Book 3, Part 4, paragraphs 61 through 79. Now after Cambyses, son of Cyrus, had lost his mind, while he was still in Egypt 2 Magus brothers rebelled against him. One of them had been left by Cambyses as steward of his house. This man now revolted from him, perceiving that the death of Smerdis was kept secret, and that few knew of it, most believing him to be still alive. Therefore he plotted to gain the royal power. He had a brother, his partner, as I said, in rebellion. This brother was in appearance very like Cyrus' son, Smerdis, whom Cambyses his brother had killed. Nor was he like him in appearance only, but he bore the same name too, Smerdis. Patizaethes the Magus persuaded this man that he would manage everything for him. He brought his brother and set him on the royal throne. Then he sent heralds to all parts, one of whom was to go to Egypt, and proclaim to the army that henceforth they must obey not Cambyses, but Smerdis the son of Cyrus. So this proclamation was made everywhere. The herald appointed to go to Egypt, finding Cambyses and his army at Ecbatana in Syria, came out before them all and proclaimed the message given him by the Magus. When Cambyses heard what the herald said, he supposed that it was the truth, and that Prexaspes, when sent to kill Smerdis, had not done it, but had played Cambyses false. And he said, fixing his eyes on Prexaspes, "Is it thus, Prexaspes, that you carried out my instructions?" "No," said Prexaspes, "this is not true, sire, that your brother Smerdis has rebelled against you. He cannot have any quarrel with you, small or great. I myself did as you instructed, and I buried him with my own hands. If then the dead can rise, you may expect to see Astyages the Mede rise up against you. But if things are as usual, assuredly no harm to you will arise from Smerdis. Now then, this is my opinion, that we pursue this herald, and interrogate him, to learn from whom he comes with his proclamation that we must obey Smerdis as our king." Cambyses liked Prexaspes' advice. The herald was pursued at once and brought, and when he came, Prexaspes put this question to him: "Fellow, you say that your message is from Cyrus' son Smerdis. Tell me this now, and you may go away unpunished. Was it Smerdis who appeared to you and gave you this charge, or was it one of his servants?" "Since King Cambyses marched to Egypt," answered the herald, "I have never seen Smerdis the son of Cyrus. The Magus whom Cambyses made overseer of his house gave me the message, saying that it was the will of Smerdis, son of Cyrus, that I should make it known to you." So spoke the herald, telling the whole truth. And Cambyses said, "Prexaspes, having done what you were told like a good man, you are free of blame. But who can this Persian be who rebels against me and usurps the name of Smerdis?" Prexaspes replied, "I think, sire, that I understand what has been done here. The rebels are the Magi, Patizaethes, whom you left steward of your house, and his brother Smerdis." The truth of the words and of a dream struck Cambyses the moment he heard the name Smerdis. For he had dreamt that a message had come to him that Smerdis, sitting on the royal throne, touched heaven with his head. And perceiving that he had killed his brother without cause, he wept bitterly for Smerdis. Having wept, and grieved by all his misfortune, he sprang upon his horse, with intent to march at once to Susa against the Magus. As he sprang upon his horse, the cap fell off the sheath of his sword, and the naked blade pierced his thigh, wounding him in the same place where he had once wounded the Egyptian god Apis. And believing the wound to be mortal, Cambyses asked what was the name of the town where he was. They told him it was Ecbatana. Now a prophecy had before this come to him from Buto, that he would end his life at Ecbatana. Cambyses supposed this to signify that he would die in old age at the Median Ecbatana, his capital city. But as the event proved, the oracle prophesied his death at Ecbatana of Syria. So when he now inquired and learned the name of the town, the shock of his wound and of the misfortune that came to him from the Magus brought him to his senses. He understood the prophecy and said, "Here Cambyses, son of Cyrus, is to die." At this time he said no more. But about 20 days later he sent for the most prominent of the Persians that were about him, and thus addressed them: "Persians, I have to make known to you something which I kept most strictly concealed. When I was in Egypt I had a dream, which I wish I had not had. It seemed to me that a messenger came from home to tell me that Smerdis, sitting on the royal throne, touched heaven with his head. Then I feared that my brother would take away my sovereignty from me, and I acted with more haste than wisdom, for it is not in the power of human nature to run away from what is to be. But I, blind as I was, sent Prexaspes to Susa to kill Smerdis. When that great wrong was done I lived without fear, for I never thought that when Smerdis was removed another man might rise against me. But I mistook altogether what was to be. I have killed my brother when there was no need, and I have lost my kingdom none the less, for it was the Magus Smerdis that the divinity forewarned in the dream would revolt. Now he has been done for by me, and I would have you believe that Smerdis, Cyrus' son, no longer lives. The Magi rule the kingdom, the one that I left caretaker of my house, and his brother Smerdis. So then, the man is dead, of an unholy destiny at the hands of his relations, who ought to have been my avenger for the disgrace I have suffered from the Magi. And as he is no longer alive, necessity constrains me to charge you, men of Persia, in his place, with the last desire of my life. In the name of the gods of my royal house I charge all of you, but chiefly those Achaemenids that are here, not to let the sovereignty fall again into Median hands. If they have it after getting it by trickery, take it back through trickery of your own. If they have got it away by force, then by force all the stronger get it back. And if you do this, May your land bring forth fruit, and your women and your flocks and herds be blessed with offspring, remaining free for all time. But if you do not get the kingdom back, or attempt to get it back, then I pray things turn out the opposite for you, and on top of this, that every Persian meet an end such as mine." With that Cambyses wept bitterly for all that had happened to him. When the Persians saw their king weep, they all tore the clothing which they wore, and wailed loud and long. But when after this the bone rotted, and the thigh rapidly putrefied, it carried off Cambyses, son of Cyrus, who had reigned in all 7 years and 5 months, but was altogether childless, without male or female issue. To the Persians who were present it was quite incredible that the Magi were masters of the kingdom. They believed that Cambyses' intent was to deceive them with his story of Smerdis' death, so that all Persia might be embroiled in a war against him. So they believed that it was Cyrus' son Smerdis who had been made king. For Prexaspes stoutly denied that he had killed Smerdis, since now that Cambyses was dead, it was not safe for him to say that he had slain the son of Cyrus with his own hands. Cambyses being dead, the Magus, pretending to be the Smerdis of like name, Cyrus' son, reigned without fear for the 7 months by which Cambyses had fallen short of reigning 8 years. In this time he benefited all his subjects to such an extent that after his death all the Asiatics, except the Persians, wished him back. For he sent to every nation he ruled and proclaimed an exemption for 3 years from military service and from tribute. Such was his proclamation at the beginning of his reign. But in the 8th month he was exposed in the following manner. There was one Otanes, son of Pharnaspes, as well born and rich a man as any Persian. This Otanes was the first to guess that the Magus was not Cyrus' son Smerdis, and who, in fact, he was. The reason was that he never left the Acropolis, nor summoned any notable Persian into his presence. And having formed this suspicion, Otanes did as follows. Cambyses had taken his daughter, whose name was Phidiame. This same girl the Magus had now, and he lived with her and with all Cambyses' other wives. Otanes sent to this daughter, asking at what man's side she lay, with Smerdis, Cyrus' son, or with some other. She sent back a message that she did not know, for, she said, she had never seen Cyrus' son, Smerdis, nor did she know who her bedfellow was. Then Otanes sent a second message to this effect: "If you do not know Cyrus' son Smerdis yourself, then find out from Atossa who it is that she and you are living with, for surely she knows her own brother." To this his daughter replied, "I cannot communicate with Atossa, nor can I see any other of the women of the household, for no sooner had this man, whoever he is, made himself king, than he sent us to live apart, each in her own appointed place." When Otanes heard that, he saw more clearly how the matter stood, and he sent her this third message: "Daughter, your noble birth obliges you to run any risk that your father commands you to face. If this man is not Smerdis, son of Cyrus, but who I think he is, then he must not get away with sleeping with you and sitting on the throne of Persia, but be punished. Now then, when he lies with you, and you see that he is sleeping, feel his ears. If he has ears, rest assured that you are living with Smerdis, son of Cyrus. But if he has none, it is Smerdis the Magus." Phidiame answered by messenger that she would run a very great risk by so doing, for if it should turn out that he had no ears, and she were caught feeling for them, he would surely kill her. Nevertheless, she would do it. So she promised to do this for her father. Cyrus, son of Cambyses, during his reign cut off the ears of this Magus Smerdis for some grave reason. So Phidiame, daughter of Otanes, performed her promise to her father. When it was her turn to go to the Magus, for their wives go in sequence to the Persians, she came to his bed and felt for the Magus's ears while he slumbered deeply, and having with no great difficulty assured herself that he had no ears, she sent and told this to her father as soon as it was morning. Otanes then took aside 2 Persians of the highest rank whom he thought worthiest of trust, Aspathanes and Gobryas, and told them the whole story. These, it would seem, had themselves suspected that it was so, and now they readily believed what Otanes revealed to them. They resolved that each should take into his confidence that Persian whom he most trusted. Otanes brought in Intaphrines, Gobryas brought Megabyzus, and Aspathanes Hydarnes. When they were 6, Darius, whose father Hystaspes was a subordinate governor of the Persians, arrived at Susa. When he came, then, the 6 Persians resolved to include Darius too. The 7 then met, and gave each other tokens of good faith, and spoke together. And when it was Darius' turn to declare his mind, he spoke as follows: I thought that I alone knew that it was the Magus who was king, and that Smerdis son of Cyrus was dead. And it was for this reason that I made haste to come, that I might effect the Magus' death. But since it turns out that you know too, and not only I think that we should act at once, and not put it off. Otanes replied, Son of Hystaspes, you have a good father, and seem likely yourself to be in no way inferior to your father. Do not hurry this undertaking without thinking, but take it up more prudently. There must be more of us to try it. To this Darius answered, You gentlemen who are here, if you do as Otanes says, know that you will die horribly. For someone will inform the Magus, looking to enrich himself alone. You ought to have done it by yourselves, but since you decided to confide in others, and have included me, let us either act today, or else understand that if the present day passes, nobody else will betray you before I do, for I shall myself betray you to the Magus. To this Otanes replied, seeing Darius' vehemence, Since you force us to hurry and will tolerate no delay, tell us now yourself how we shall pass into the palace and attack them. For you know yourself, I suppose, if not because you have seen them, then you have heard, that guards are stationed all around. How shall we go past the guards? Otanes, answered Darius, there are many things that cannot be described in words, but in deed. And there are other things that can be described in words, but nothing illustrious comes of them. You know well that the guards who are set are easy to go by. There is no one who will not allow us to pass, from respect or from fear, because of who we are. And further, I have myself the best pretext for entering, for I shall say that I have just arrived from Persia, and have a message for the king from my father. When it is necessary to lie, lie. For we want the same thing, liars and those who tell the truth. Some lie to win credence and advantage by lies, while others tell the truth in order to obtain some advantage by the truth and to be more trusted. Thus we approach the same ends by different means. If the hope of advantage were taken away, the truth-teller would be as ready to lie as the liar to tell the truth. Now if any of the watchmen willingly let us pass, it will be better for him later. But if any tries to withstand us, let us note him as an enemy, and so thrust ourselves in and begin our work. Then Gobryas said, Friends, when shall we have a better chance to win back the kingship, or if we cannot, to die, since we who are Persians are ruled by a Mede, a Magus, and he a man that has no ears? Those of you that were with Cambyses at his deathbed of course remember the curse which he pronounced as he died on the Persians if they should not try to get back the kingship, although we did not believe Cambyses then, but thought that he spoke to deceive us. Now therefore my vote is that we follow Darius' plan, and not quit this council to do anything else but attack the Magus at once. So spoke Gobryas, and they all consented to what he said. While they were making these plans, by coincidence the following happened. The Magi had resolved after consideration to make a friend of Prexaspes, because he had been wronged by Cambyses, who had killed his son with an arrow, and because he alone knew of the death of Cyrus' son Smerdis, having himself been the slayer; but besides this, because he was in great repute among the Persians. For these reasons they summoned him, and tried to make him a friend, having bound him by tokens of good faith and oaths to keep to himself, and betray to no one their deception of the Persians, and promising to give him all things in great abundance. When Prexaspes agreed to do this, Since the Magi importuned him, the Magi made this second proposal to him, that they should call an assembly of all the Persians before the palace wall, and he should go up on to a tower, and declare that it was Smerdis, son of Cyrus, and no other, who was king of Persia. They gave him this charge, because they thought him to be the man most trusted by the Persians, and because he had often asserted that Cyrus' son Smerdis was alive, and had denied the murder. When Prexaspes said that he was ready to do this too, the Magi summoned the Persians together, and brought him up on to a tower, and bade him speak. Then, deliberately forgetting all the Magi's instructions, he traced the lineage of Cyrus from Achaemenes downwards. When he came at last to the name of Cyrus, he recounted all the good which that king had done to Persia, and after he had narrated this, he revealed the truth, saying that he had concealed it before, as it had not been safe for him to tell what had happened, but at the present time necessity forced him to reveal it. And he said that he himself, forced by Cambyses, had killed Smerdis, son of Cyrus, and that the Magi were in power. Then, invoking a terrible curse on the Persians if they did not win back the throne and take vengeance on the Magi, he threw himself headlong down from the tower. So Prexaspes, a man who was always well thought of, perished in this way. The 7 Persians, when they had decided to attack the Magi at once and not delay, prayed to the gods and set forth, knowing nothing of what had happened to Prexaspes. But when they had gone halfway, they learned what had happened to Prexaspes. Then they argued there, standing beside the road, Otani's party demanding that they delay, and not attack while events were in flux, and Darius' party that they go directly and do what they had decided and not put it off. While they were arguing, they saw 7 pairs of hawks chase and slash and tear to bits 2 pairs of vultures. And seeing this, all 7 consented to Darius' opinion, and went on to the palace, encouraged by the birds. When they came to the gate, it turned out as Darius had expected. The guards, out of respect for the leading men in Persia, and never suspecting that there would be trouble from them, allowed them to pass, who enjoyed divine guidance, and no one asked any questions. And when they came to the court, they met the eunuchs that carry messages, who asked the 7 why they had come, and while they were questioning these, they were threatening the watchmen for letting them pass, and restraining the 7 who wanted to go on. These gave each other the word, drew their knives, and stabbing the eunuchs who barred their way, went forward at a run to the men's apartment. Both the Magi were within, deliberating about the consequences of Prexaspes' act. Seeing the eunuchs in confusion and hearing their cries, they both sprang up, and when they realized what was happening, they turned to defending themselves. One rushed to take down a bow, the other went for a spear. Then the fighting started. The one that had caught up the bow found it was no use to him, as the antagonists were close and jostling one another, but the other defended himself with his spear, wounding Espathanes in the thigh and Entaphrines in the eye. Entaphrines lost his eye from the wound, but was not killed. So one of the Magi wounded these, the other, as the bow was no use to him, fled into a chamber adjoining the men's apartment, and would have shut its door. 2 of the 7 flung into the room with him, Darius and Gobryas. As Gobryas and the Magus wrestled together, Darius stood helpless in the darkness, afraid of stabbing Gobryas. Gobryas, seeing Darius stand helpless, asked why he did not lend a hand, and he said, "Because I am afraid for you, that I might stab you." And Gobryas answered, "Stick your sword, even if it goes through us both." So Darius, complying, stabbed with his knife, and somehow struck the Magus. When they had killed the Magi and cut off their heads, they left their wounded there because of their infirmity and for the sake of guarding the Acropolis, while 5 of them, carrying the Magi's heads, ran outside with much shouting and commotion, calling all Persians to aid, telling what they had done and showing the heads. At the same time they killed every Magus that came in their way. The Persians, when they learned what had been done by the 7, and how the Magi had tricked them, resolved to follow the example set, and drew their daggers and killed all the Magi they could find. and if nightfall had not stopped them, they would not have left one Magus alive. This day is the greatest holy day that all Persians alike keep. They celebrate a great festival on it, which they call the Massacre of the Magi. While the festival lasts, no Magus may go outdoors, but during this day the Magi remain in their houses. End of Book 3, Part 4.